Welcome back to App Stories. Today's show is brought to you by Hit the Island. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm having a good Friday. We're recording here. It's been a big week at Mac Stories. We've had all sorts of things going on. I wanted to start off this episode, though, by letting people know what we talked about a little bit in the pre-show today, which was we talked about AI-generated music and our thoughts and feels about that, as well as test flight and managing betas as an outlier, because I wrote a story last week all about test flight and the problems I've had with it. And we went into a little more depth about what those problems are and what we think should be done and whether or not it's something that Apple should address. So we talked about that in the pre-show, and you can get the pre-show by subscribing to App Stories Plus or Club Premier, which is our Club Mac Stories top tier. App Stories Plus, just go to appstories.plus to learn more about all the benefits. We put it out early. It's ad-free, and it's extended with that pre-show and high bitrate audio. And then Club Premier, App Stories Plus comes with that package, but it also comes with all the benefits of Club Mac Stories Plus, which is our Club Mac Stories subscription service that includes special columns by me and Federico, our Discord server community, special AV Club monthly media picks and audio events in the Discord, and a whole bunch more. So check that out if you want to. You can go to plus.club for that one. And that's my little spiel about the club this week, Federico.
Very nice. Okay. I believe we also have some follow-up before we get started with today's episode.
We do have a lot of follow-up, Federico, because last week, well, where do you want to start? Should we start with Automation April since that has just concluded?
Yes.
All right. Well, we have concluded with a whole bunch of giveaways. We did giveaways in the Discord this week. We had 4 of them. We had a discount on Better Touch Tool. We had a giveaway of Surfed, as well as broadcasts and food noms. And then in Club Mac Stories, we had a giveaway for Menu Bar Stats, which is a fantastic app and a recent sponsor of Mac Stories. But, you know, there's a lot more going on besides the giveaways. We continue to write stories, and we concluded the contest. The submissions were closed, and our judges, as we speak, are busy going through all the submissions. There were just a ton of submissions, and I know that this weekend I'm going to be pretty busy going through that stuff myself.
Yeah, me too. That's exactly what I plan on doing over the weekend, just setting aside a lot of time for all the shortcuts that we receive from people, which is always amazing to see just the creativity that some folks have when it comes to shortcuts. It was a busy week on Mac Stories also because we relaunched our Mac Stories Unwind podcast. Now, I don't want to rehash all that info that we shared on Unwind itself. We also have a story on the site where you can go to read all the details. But essentially, we are relaunching Unwind with the same focus on media. So same, weekly schedule, media picks before the weekend. But we are rolling the fun aspect, the casual conversations about pop culture, American and Italian culture, and just funny, laid back behind the scenes from Unplugged. We're rolling that into Unwind. And in addition to that, we are rebranding. Doing a bit of rebranding of sorts, to be consistent with App Stories, we are doing Unwind and Unwind Plus. Unwind Plus being what replaces Unplugged. It's a special version of Unwind that is ad-free, comes in high bitrate audio because we do love our high bitrate audio.
We do.
How our voices sound like that. And it also comes out a day early. In fact, this week, we announced this whole rebrand. And Unwind Plus came out on Thursday, and Unwind came out on Friday. So it comes out one day early for members. We are also rolling the AV Club, which is another media-focused event that we do on our club Discord. That monthly session, that monthly get-together with members will become one of the weekly episodes of Unwind each month. So go check out Mac Stories for all the details, but we are super committed to Unwind, and in fact we think it's going to be a lot more fun and a lot more interesting for hopefully even more people going forward.
All right, Federico. Last week we talked about your M2 MacBook Air and your Mac setup in general with a lot of the apps you're working on. And I know people had a couple of questions for you that I saw both in our club Discord and on Mastodon. And the first one I want to follow up with you on is, what is that USB-C hub that you mentioned that you're using? I think I know, but I didn't have it in the show notes because I wasn't 100% sure, and you didn't name it last week.
So it's a combination of the Microsoft Audio Dock,
right?
But the USB-C switch for switching between two inputs is the Conbull USB-C switch that I got from Amazon. It's one of those no-brand. Like, there are plenty of these switches that all look the same. This one in particular just happened to work for me for switching the studio display from Mac and iPadOS input to PC input. So it's the Conbull. I'm sure you can find plenty of others that look exactly the same. Just, trial and error with these things from Amazon. Yeah. That's the one that I have.
Right. And I know it's been several episodes ago now, but you also talked about it quite a bit on Connected as well with Mike and Steven. So some people want to hear more about your experiments in USB switches. That's a good place to go as well. The other thing is that a couple people mentioned to me something that I actually didn't realize, because you talked about an app that I had not heard of called Paletro, which is part of a setup subscription. And apparently that functionality, which, that app allows you to hit a keyboard combination and search for actions that you can take that are, embedded in the app's menu in the menu bar, and allows you to both execute those actions and see the keyboard shortcuts. I guess that's built right into Raycast, and I didn't even realize that. So that was a great tip.
Yeah, that's right. I forget how you activate it from
it's Raycast? Under navigation, and it's in the settings under navigation, and you can set a hotkey for it or an alias and get to it just as quickly as you can Paletro, doing it that way. So if you're already using Raycast, that's another option if you don't want to try Paletro.
Search menu items. Let's see, I can give it a hotkey. Yeah, I forgot that this existed, but the people have spoken and the people are right in this case.
Yeah, they are right. I gave it a little try myself, gave it a hotkey this week and used it a few times, and it's really nice.
All right. So we should talk about our wishes for iOS 17. A few words before we begin, because I think it's necessary. We do this every year. So for the next few weeks, we're going to do individual episodes of App Stories, each about one operating system that we assume is going to be updated at WWDC. We time these episodes to come out just before WWDC so that our wish lists can be as complete in terms of what we want to see as possible. Now, some people are going to be like, "Oh, why don't you do these wish lists in January so when Apple can implement those features?" Well, first of all, I really don't think that Apple goes through a list of podcast episodes and they're like, "Oh, let's see. This is a John feature. This is a teaching feature. This is a Mike feature." Right. We don't really do it for that. We also do it now because we have time. We had the time to use the OSs that have come out in September for a while, and so our wishes are more, fleshed out, more complete. Second, and really important, we're gonna go fast in this episode. Because we have a lot of things to cover. Some of them we have mentioned before. There's no need to reiterate what we mean, but we have dozens of things we'd like to see. We're going to go fast. There's going to be chapters in the episode. Just that. I just wanted to mention that. Like Sonic, got to go fast, So we got to go fast.
Yep. And looking through our notes, I think you and I have some overlap, so we should try to hit these together where we can.
And third, there's also a third thing.
All right.
We're doing something a bit different this year, because we're going to go through all of our wishes, but at the end, today and for the next few episodes, each of us, we're going to pick our top 3 wishes for each OS. So John is going to have a top 3 wishes for iOS 17. I'm going to have a top 3 wishes for iOS 17, and so forth for iPadOS, macOS, watchOS, tvOS, and I think we're going to do Reality OS, or, whatever it's going to end up being called.
I think, Federico, not only should we pick our top 3, but we should negotiate an App Stories top 3.
Oh, so top 3 each, and then we choose the App Stories top 3?
Yes. So one of us is going to get 2, and the other one's going to get 1. But yeah, we're going to...
Nice. I like that. Okay. I like the democratic process that this involves. Okay.
All right. I have to have a fight over some of these, but let's get started. I just want to start out, Federico, with a theme for iOS 17, which to me is sensible defaults with maximum customization options, because I feel like Apple's pretty good at the defaults. What they're not as good about is customization. And I think one thing you're going to see from us all over the place in these picks is the desire for more customization at every level. And for me, that starts with Control Center. And I know that this is something that you have talked about before yourself, and feel free to chime in. But here's my proposal. It's time to get rid of the Today view. The thing you see when you swipe to the right, which has been there for a very long time. I have mine all set up the way I like it, thinking, you know what? I can just swipe over there, get a glance at my schedule and the weather and a couple of other things, like the packages coming to my house. But I just don't use it very much because it's a relic of older versions of iOS. I don't use it a lot. I think a lot of people don't use it a lot. And I think it would be easier to get to Control Center if I could swipe anywhere on the screen to the right, and there's my Control Center full screen without having to go up into that corner, because the corner is a problem. If you're operating your phone one hand, it's very hard to get to Control Center, let alone all the things that I think ought to be changed in there. I really would love to see more customization, and particularly opening it up to third parties so that I can, just like I do on my lock screen, I can decide what are the apps and features that I want living in my Control Center.
Interesting. So I'm not sure I agree on the getting rid of the Today view for Control Center.
I know I'm going out on a limb with that one, Federico, but I wanted to start out strong.
One of the things about Control Center is that you can activate it from everywhere. So even if you're using an app, you can just swipe down and you see Control Center. You don't need to go back to the home screen.
That is a fair point.
But I do agree on really everything else. I would love to get just a design refresh, a more distinctive look, and a use of like different shapes for the buttons and sliders, and the use of color. Just use some color somewhere. Control Center has been a monochrome UI area for way too long at this point. I mean, you go back to the days of iOS 7, and sure, Control Center came up from the bottom, but it wasn't that different, stylistically speaking. I think it's time for different shapes, more iconic looks, and more distinctive, little UI accessories in Control Center. I would love, personally, to have third-party toggles in Control Center. So let developers offer a third-party toggle for their app. Like, for example, let me set a VPN from Control Center, or I don't know, let me toggle, for example, the timeline streaming mode in a Mastodon client, or just let me toggle whatever I want, like a Discord setting, for example, from Control Center. Basically, treat those like little lock screen widgets. But just they're toggles in Control Center. You can call them Control Center extensions or whatever. Let developers offer sliders or other types of UI in there. And also, and this probably sounds obvious, but let me pin shortcuts to Control Center. Just let me quickly activate a shortcut from everywhere, especially on the iPhone, especially on iOS, which doesn't have, normally I would say most people don't have, a Bluetooth keyboard connected to their iPhones. I mean, with the exception of, we have a club member, David, who's, I would say probably the world's leading expert on using a Bluetooth keyboard with an iPhone. Right. But I think it's fair to say it's not a thing most people do. And on the iPhone, of course, that means it's not that easy to get to Spotlight. So running any shortcut you want pinned from Control Center, that would be nice. And just third-party stuff, a new UI, and shortcuts in Control Center.
We should talk about the lock screen really briefly too, Federico, because I think that it would be nice if that bottom row got opened up a little bit. I hesitate a little bit here only because I do use the camera from the lock screen a lot, and I probably wouldn't replace the camera myself, but I would consider replacing the flashlight, because I'd like to have, for instance, a shortcut right there, or maybe something related to the home app. Maybe I get up in the morning, and even before I unlock my phone, that's where I can tap to turn on the lights in my kitchen or something like that. I definitely want more on the lock screen from Apple. Maybe that means a second row up top. I kind of don't see that we're going to get anything more than that necessarily, because I do think that the focus on the wallpaper is important to them. But I feel like we do need a little bit more flexibility on the lock screen to do more there.
Yeah, I had this under my widgets category. And my wish there was for more widgets on the lock screen. I really think I should be able to customize the launchers at the bottom, and I should be able to have, 2 rows of widgets on the lock screen. Let me choose if I want to overcrowd my lock screen with the widgets. Because just like you give me the option to choose any wallpaper I want, give me the option to use how many widgets I want. Maybe 2 rows, maybe 3 rows. I don't know. It shouldn't be up to Apple to decide. It should be up to users to decide what they want to do with widgets. And also about widgets, but the home screen ones, I think it's time for interactive widgets. And by interactive widgets, I mean widgets that allow you to control app behavior or quickly capture information. Basically what you can do on Android. Like on Android, for example, you have an Apple Music widget that's a mini player that you can put on the home screen. And imagine having a mini player right there on the home screen. Imagine having a widget that can animate, that can scroll. Imagine having, for example, a real-time lyrics widget for Apple Music on your home screen that shows you the lyrics of what you're listening to. And of course, there could be also widgets for entering text. Like, let me quickly capture a note without having to jump into the app that's associated with the widget and type in my note there. Let me just, tap on the widget, pop up a keyboard, let me save an idea right there. Or a task manager. Task manager has a widget. Let me check off a to-do from the home screen from the widget. Instead of, get rid of this behavior that whenever you tap the widget, an app launches. I think it's time for interactivity in WidgetKit.
Yeah, I'd also like to see a record button so you can do voice memos. I think that would be really nice.
See?
And another one would be a simple refresh button, because a lot of apps, developers can't really count on when those widgets are going to update. And some widgets really rely on up-to-date information. And I'd like to be able, if for some reason a widget is stuck, to be able to just hit a button and refresh it, whether that's something like Timery or a weather app or an app like Flighty, all that stuff. I'd like to be able to refresh it manually if I can.
I have a whole section in my wish list called System.
Okay.
If you allow me to go through this one.
Go for it.
This was a previous wish of mine. I believe I used it on last year's episode of Connected. I really want to see split view on the iPhone. I'm one of those weirdos who has a big iPhone and I would love to use 2 apps at once. We've seen some examples of apps that have done their own custom in-app split view. For example, Spring for Twitter, then the upcoming Mona for Mastodon. Fiery Feeds recently added a split screen mode, which I'm going to write about on Mac Stories. It's a little bit cramped even on an iPhone Pro Max, but it's doable. All right. And I think Apple could do a much better version of this, that accounts for things like title bars. You could have like a minimized title bar mode. Apple could do a much nicer job with dealing with the keyboard when the keyboard comes up and maybe one of the apps needs to hide away temporarily. I would love to have better multitasking on the iPhone, proper multitasking on the iPhone.
Federico, it reminds me very much of right before we got split view on the iPad, when we saw some developers essentially doing that within their own suite of apps.
Yep.
And I do recall even one of them, I think, told us that they had invented that.
Yeah, I remember that. Speaking of which, I can't believe that I'm about to say this. I would love to see Stage Manager on the iPhone. I actually think...
Really?
Let me explain. I actually think that if you were Apple and you rethought the multitasking app switcher on the iPhone around the idea of iPhone apps can now do multi-window, which is another thing I would like to see. Why can I do multi-window on my iPad? Like I can open multiple Safari windows, but I cannot open multiple Safari windows on my iPhone.
Bring back gallery mode.
Bring back. Hold on. Bring back WebOS and the Palm Pre with the card-like UI. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. But let me open multiple cards for multiple windows for iPhone apps. At the bottom, imagine if when you swipe up and you open the app switcher on the iPhone.
Yeah, right.
Imagine if there, instead of icons, instead of just the app icons, you could also see the little stages that you have, right?
That would be
And
nice.
Stage Manager would make sense on the iPhone because in that case, with the very minimal space that you have on a phone screen, and this could be a pro feature only, but with the minimal space, the core design of Stage Manager, meaning it arranges the windows on your behalf, it resizes the windows on your behalf. In that case, Stage Manager would make a lot of sense. On a phone, you wouldn't need to have pixel precise, resizing of windows. You wouldn't need to have keyboard shortcuts. You wouldn't need to have automation. You would just need to have the benefits of a little workspace on your phone. If you want to be productive on your phone, you could repurpose the strip as the little thumbnails for switching between workspaces, and you could also enable multi-window on the iPhone. So that's my weird multitasking system wish for iOS 17.
Okay, I like it. I think that's a good one.
I have a few more. Let me save an incoming notification as a reminder. Now, I don't know if this ever happens to you, but I get a notification and I'm like, oh, I got to do something about that. And so instead of opening the notification...
Can't do it right now, though. Yeah.
Exactly. Instead of opening the notification, I leave it there. But then as I leave it there, more notifications come in, and it eventually gets buried in the list, and maybe I forget about it. Mm-hmm. So instead, let me long press on the notification and be like, save this as a reminder. Like, let me add this to reminders. The reminder, of course, could have a dip link to whatever the notification was linking to. Apple has all the system in place to make this happen. And I just would love to see this idea of like, I got a notification, let me save it immediately, and I'll get back to it later. Another one for you. So you know how we often complain that Apple doesn't have a clipboard manager?
Right.
I would love to see a clipboard manager built into the system keyboard. Just like you can already switch between the QWERTY keyboard and the emoji mode, the emoji picker, you could just switch to a clipboard picker. What better place than the Apple built-in private local keyboard, than that to store the items that you copy.
Yeah, we've seen third parties do that too. There are keyboard extension apps that are clipboard managers, but Apple obviously could embed it much more deeply into the OS itself.
Exactly. So like imagine a clipboard manager mode, like a special clipboard view built into the system keyboard. I have two more for the system category. A few dynamic island tweaks would be nice to have. Like, for example, I think just because people cannot agree on a correct implementation of this, at this point, let the people choose what they want to do, whether they tap or the long press the dynamic island. Should a tap expand the dynamic island, or should it take you to the app that's providing a live activity, as it currently does? Should a long press expand it, or should the long press take you to the app? I think it's time to make this a setting. I think I can, and I've gone back and forth on this. I could see both arguments. I can see both ways. I think it's ripe for a setting in this case. And lastly, I also think it's time to rethink the share sheet. The current share sheet design is old. It's confusing. The separation between iMessage groups, share extensions, action extensions is kind of clunky, hard to explain. Managing extensions is also clunky. I just feel like there should be a better way to handle the share menu that is not basically the same design that we've had since iOS 8.
Right. I can't believe I didn't actually put this on my list, because I'm 100% with you on this one, Federico. I mean, I feel like I understand what the difference between a share extension and an action extension is, but I clearly don't have the same understanding that a lot of people do.
Honestly, I don't anymore. I don't even know anymore.
Well, and that's partly because I think people implement it in different ways, and sometimes it's in one place, sometimes it's in the other. And I think the fact that shortcuts got stapled onto action extensions, in the long haul, that has been a mistake, because action extensions, even more so than share extensions, are very hard to parse, because not only is there no color in any of the icons in the action extension list, but you've got all of your shortcuts with share sheet support in them listed there as well, which I think is a problem. It's one of those things that I recently went through and cleaned out, because there was just too much going on in there, both in terms of apps that I'd turned things on for, as well as shortcuts. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Hit the Island, the delightful iPhone, iPad, and Apple Watch game from Fun Media. Hit the Island is an innovative game that challenges you to bounce a ball off of the iPhone 14 Pro's dynamic island, and it just got a big 3.0 update. The game, which also works with the camera notch on other devices and supports haptic feedback, was updated with a long list of improvements, game modes, and new levels. There's Jump Up, which requires tapping on the screen to navigate your ball to the island around various objects. Aim, which lets you shoot the ball through puzzles to reach the island. Break Bricks, which requires breaking brick obstacles to reach the dynamic island. And Shooter, which tests your marksmanship with objects that fall from the island at you. Plus, there are power-ups that activate double paddles, a small paddle, a big ball, a shield, and even a gift box. Also, don't forget to try your hand at collecting all of the Hit the Island Game Center achievements and invite a friend to a challenge match. Download Hit the Island today by visiting the App Store or learn more by going to funmedia.com. That's FUNNMEDIA.com. We'll have a link in the show notes, too. Our thanks to Hit the Island and Fun Media for their support of the show. All right, Federico, I want to go through another joint category and kick things off with shortcuts because...
Oh, okay.
And I struggled with this one, actually, because a big part of me really just wants the app to be more stable and reliable.
Yes.
Because I feel like with every point release, a different set of things breaks, and that certain things have been lingering around, either broken or semi-broken or rebroken time and time again as the OS gets updated. So
rebroken. Yeah, that's
yeah,
funny, but it's correct.
That happens with shortcuts quite a bit, unfortunately. And so I would like both. I would just like it to be more stable and for the UI to be a little more fluid and easy to use, because things do still tend to jump around a bit when you're editing shortcuts, especially on iOS. And so, if I got nothing else, stability and shortcuts, I would consider a win. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of things that I really want. And I tried to focus mainly on newish things, because you and I have talked about our wishes for shortcuts many years running. And there are a lot of things on those old lists that have never come true. But I want to start with talking to you a little bit about UI elements in shortcuts, because I think the time has come for shortcuts to become more than just kind of like a behind the scenes scripting tool, and to become an actual app development tool. Even if they're just super simple apps, there are a lot of good UI elements already available in shortcuts, but it's too limited. I mean, I really would like to have the ability to create settings views for shortcuts. Yes. Right? So you don't have to go through that setup process that you do with a lot of your shortcuts that you've made. I'd love to see table views implemented, so that something that's a little bit more robust and general purpose than just like a list view, but a full-on table view that includes the ability to show images and have titles and subtitles and links to things, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, grids, searchable, proper searchable lists, bigger text fields that are like an actual input field with multiple lines.
Pickers of various kinds would be nice.
Of different kinds. The ability to, like you said, to design settings so that you can have a proper UI to give people like a setting screen inside the shortcut. Like all of that, I 100% agree.
Yeah, no, so that's probably my biggest one. I think, too, that another place that needs an awful lot of work in shortcuts is the integration with the Home app and HomeKit, because, I could sit here and try to explain all the ways I've been frustrated by Home time and again with trying to do automations, but it feels like every idea I have, there's a roadblock somewhere for what I want to do, unless it's something super, super, super simple where it's just, it's 2:00 and my lights come on in my office. I mean, that kind of stuff, totally doable. But once you get beyond the super simple stuff like that, you're met with frustrations. And there are ways to work around it. There are third-party apps that help a little bit, but I think that more needs to be built in on a fundamental shortcuts level to make this work even better. Yeah. And then I would add, let's see, I'm going to try to go quickly with the rest of these. I'd like better conflict resolution for shortcuts. You know, when you have, whether it's a keyboard shortcut that is a conflict, or you have an error and you get an ambiguous error message, I want ways to kind of proactively to be able to debug what's going on. And there's a lot of tools, I think, in kind of that debug realm that shortcuts could benefit from, whether it's breakpoints, you know, ways to pause actions or deactivate them temporarily without actually deleting them from your shortcut in order to, you know, test various parts of your shortcut. That would be great. I'd also like to create reusable blocks of functions, you know, of actions. I call them cutlets for shortcuts.
Nice name.
I like that, right? They can take that. I won't mind if they use cutlets. Trademark John Voorhees. But yeah, I'd like to have reusable function blocks like that. And I guess finally, I'll mention what we've mentioned before, which is the widgets. I think the widgets on the home screen really need to be more dense. There needs to be more information there, and they need to do the extra large one on the iPad as well.
Yeah. So all of this, I agree. So let me just add a few of my own. I would love to see if Apple does proper multitasking on the iPhone. The ability to control multitasking. So let me control, Windows. Let me, set stages if Stage Manager comes to the phone. Let me set split views and all of that. Widgets you've mentioned. For automations, personal automations, I would love to see third-party triggers. Let developers offer third-party events in their apps so that if something happens in an app, like, I don't know, one of my posts on Mastodon gets more than 20 likes, that could be a third-party trigger for a shortcut or something like that. And then I have a whole list of power user features, some of which you've already mentioned, like a better setup flow for settings, and have a better onboarding flow for a shortcut. I would love to see a way to store credentials. Like, why do I need to ask users to put a password in a plain text field instead of like a proper password, secure keychain UI built into shortcuts? I would love the ability to color code any action I want. I would love the ability to collapse any group and create any group of actions, even if they're not contained inside of a conditional block or a repeat block. Just let me group them, let me color code them, let me add a description for what that group of action is, and let me collapse it. For long shortcuts, I would love to see a mini-map on the right side of the editor. Just like you have a mini-map in Xcode that allows you to quickly preview a shortcut and scroll to a portion of the shortcut, let me have a mini-map on the right side of the editor. While loops. This is one of those, classic programming functionalities that I cannot believe is still not available in Shortcut. A while loop would be basically execute a group of actions, repeat a group of actions until a condition is true or not true anymore. And you can fake your way around this now in a repeat loop with a bunch of variables. It shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that complex. Add support for proper while loops in shortcuts. I would love to have a better UI for managing dictionaries and JSON content. Take a look at what Simon Strowing, one of our judges for Automation April, has done with the excellent JSON app. In terms of like what you can do to parse and browse the hierarchy of a dictionary. And lastly, I would probably mention for power user features, let me trigger any shortcut system-wide. I mentioned a control center toggle on the iPhone. I will talk about hotkeys on the iPad, but today is not iPadOS day, so I'll leave it at that. Let me trigger shortcuts more easily system-wide on my iPhone. Oh, and I forgot one sort of my dark horse for shortcuts in iOS 17. If Apple ever, probably not this year, so this is probably an iOS 18 wish or something, but if they ever do a real large language model, I would love, and I spoke about this before, I would love to build shortcuts like even the basic structure of a shortcut via natural language. Imagine being able to say, hey, assistant,
that would be great.
I need a shortcut that gives me 5 reminders for today and sorts them by date and lets me choose one of them from a list. Like imagine if you could put together a little program, which is effectively what a shortcut is, with a natural language syntax, instead of telling people, hey, you just need to find the right action and drag them in the right order. Imagine how that would kickstart usage of shortcuts and discovery of shortcuts for a lot more people than what the current app design does today.
All right, Federico, let's dive into music because I know you and I both have quite a few things here to talk about. We do. It's something we listen to every day. And, I think at the base level, music needs a refreshed design. Yes. It needs to have better information density. I want to see, I think to me, the most frustrating view right now is the listen now view, because I don't feel like it is catering to what I want out of the music app very well, because it's really focused more than anything else. It's focused on what I listened to very recently. There's a whole row that's nothing but recently played, which is fine. But if I recently played it, I'm sure other people like to go back to that and listen again. I don't. And the way to accommodate both me and the person who wants to dive back into recently listened is to let me customize it. Let me put the sections in there that I want, because there are a lot of them that really don't fit with the way I use music. And I also feel like Apple needs to do a little bit more Spotify-like job in terms of its recommendation engine, because it's very much focused on, if I listen to Mumford & Sons, it will not only recommend to me like the Essentials playlist for Mumford & Sons, but it'll be like, here's a bunch of bands from the 2000s. Here's a bunch of singer-songwriter folk bands. And I feel like it's too specific to the very current stuff that you play. And it would be better if it looked, look back maybe 9 months or 12 months and come up with more variety based on not just the bands that I'm listening to, but the bands that are like what I'm listening to. And I know that they have, you like this art, you listen to this artist, you might like these artists. But I feel like that is very much artist and album driven, when it probably, I would like a little bit more of a playlist approach to this, a song by song approach. And maybe that's just because I'm very much a playlist person, but I'd like to have that option at least to have those algorithms driven more on a song by song basis. And on top of that, speaking of playlists, if you go into a playlist that has been updated, it will tell you this playlist was updated on this date. I'd like to be able to somehow subscribe to that. Let this be a little bit more like podcasts. No, I don't want my podcasts in the music app, but I would like to be able to subscribe in a way to my favorite playlists as well as to my favorite artists, and then have all that music displayed to me when there's new stuff available. So I don't have to go looking for it, that it's actually delivered to me. And I don't want a lot of notifications either. I do want to be able, however, to go into the music app and find more of what's new with the artists and the playlists that I already follow.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of these. A lot of these ideas are also in my list. I would love to see more information density with customizable sections. I think the music app currently wastes a lot of space, especially on the iPhone with those giant posters for playlists and recommendations. I want easier, faster access to recommendations. Make them smaller, make them more timely, make them more accurate. I would love to have, I already mentioned the interactive widgets. I think Apple needs to do a better job at dealing with new releases and upcoming releases. I would love to see a proper calendar view for upcoming releases from the artists that I've marked as favorites. And I also would like to see a new music mix playlist that actually shows me new music on Fridays. For whatever reason, the Spotify New Music Friday playlist is much, much more accurate and has the actual new songs that came out on Friday, whereas Apple Music gets those songs like the following Friday. I don't know why, but it needs to be faster. I would love to have a proper, like, full-on history view, which Spotify has, that shows you all the singles, like songs, albums, playlists, like all the things you listen to in reverse chronological order. You mentioned subscribing to playlists. I want to have collaborative playlists, another of those Spotify features nice. That people have been asking for like almost a decade at this point, and Apple Music still doesn't have it. And lastly, I mention this one every year, smart playlists. Let me put together custom sections, custom playlists, just like I can with Marvis. Now, I don't expect Apple to replicate all the controls and the fine-grained options that you can find in Marvis Pro, but give me something, at least. Let me put together a playlist that has some filtering criteria. Again, something you can do on the Mac and that you still cannot do on iOS and iPadOS.
I think that music would be a good place for Apple to dip its toe into generative AI too.
Yep.
Right? I mean, I think creating playlists based on natural language, things like, your full history view notion gave me this idea, which is, create me a 20-song playlist of everything that I listened to, or of songs that I listened to in 2019. Just something simple like that lets me create that kind of smart playlist on the fly using Siri.
Yeah, I shouldn't have to use ChatGPT and SGPT to make playlists based on natural language.
Right.
All right. So I told you and our listeners we were going to go fast. Now we are going to go fast because we have
even faster.
We're going to go even faster because we have an app grab bag to deal with over here. So we're going to do this round robin style. Safari. I want to be able to use my Safari extensions in Safari View Controller. I don't know why Safari View Controller doesn't have access to my extensions, but I would love to use them there. And we mention this every year. I think it's time to rethink Safari Reading List. Give it a new UI, give it tagging support. I went as far last year as asking for a dedicated reading list app. Even if you don't do that, a new UI, show it some love, give it some love. Tagging, filters maybe. Let me put together folders of articles or, saved searches for articles. Those are my 2 Safari wishes this year.
All right. This is going to shock you, but I actually have suggestions for the phone app because I have something like 70 unlistened to voicemails because you know what happens? Spam calls come in and I don't answer them. And then a lot of times they just record a bunch of blank audio to a voicemail. And you can't bulk edit those voicemails. So I can't delete all 70 of those at once. I have to go through and tap on each one and then hit delete. And I'm not going to do it. So I have 70 unlistened to voicemails in my phone app. Plus, when you do listen to a voicemail, there's no scrubber for the audio that they've recorded, which means that if you get one of those messages, which is a bunch of dead air before the message actually starts, you have to kind of like wait around and listen to it. And I'm an impatient person. I want to be able to scrub through it and see if it's just junk or if it's something that I should listen to where someone just didn't start recording right away. So those are my wishes for the phone app.
Podcasts. John is convincing me to try Apple Podcasts again. I'm not sure if this experiment is going to stick for the 3 reasons that I'm going to mention as my wishes for the Podcasts app. It doesn't have smart speed. It doesn't have a trim silence feature that lets me save time when I'm listening to podcasts. My time is limited. I don't want to listen to silence. All major podcast clients these days, they have it. Apple itself, they have a trim silence feature.
They do.
In voice memos. I think it's time to bring that. And my second wish to podcasts, the second one being volume boost. Apple, again, they already have an audio enhancement tool, again, in voice memos. I think it's time to add smart speed and volume boost to podcasts. And my third wish, I'm just realizing now in front of my MacBook Air that podcasts doesn't sync my Up Next queue. So what happens? Please explain this to me, John. I'm one of those people that, I have my all episodes view and I see all the new episodes. I want to pick and choose some of them and put them in a queue. On the iPhone, I can do this, put them in the App Next queue. But that App Next queue is exclusive to the iPhone. When I open my Mac, if I want to resume on the Mac or on the iPad, that App Next queue is gone because each device has its own App Next queue. How do I create a queue of specific episodes that syncs everywhere in Apple Podcasts? I don't think I can.
It's a good question. I don't think you can, although I've literally been using it for like 3 days. So, stay tuned if we can figure out a way to do that. I would add to your wishes for podcasts, Federico, a little less emphasis on exploring shows that I don't listen to. It's fine for it to be a dedicated tab. I get it. That's a good way to discover new things. But it's not just there. It's in multiple places. And I would rather have it kind of off to its own for when I need it and when I want it, but I don't want it in my face when I'm looking through some of the shows that I already follow. All right. The App Store.
Ooh,
I think Apple needs to go back to its roots. The App Store is becoming a junk store. The Today tab is terrible now. I don't go to the App Store anymore. You know why? Because I went the other day and every single article, if you could call them that, was for games. Some of them were okay games, some of them were junky games, but it was nothing but games. And there was, I think, one list of like top downloaded apps, which had some things in it that weren't games. But that was it. The editorial content on the App Store is getting buried. They've had good editorial content historically, but you have to go to the other tabs to find it. And even then, there's more of an emphasis today, I think, on what are essentially listicles, which wasn't always the case in the past, which I think is a shame. I think that the App Store needs to focus more on editorial content, and they ought to tell us who the authors are so we can follow and know who we're reading and, form a connection with those people, because that's the way the rest of the web works. There are people on, various websites that I read because of the people who are writing the stories, not because of the publication that they're publishing them on. And I'd like to see that come to the App Store too.
All right. What can I mention here? Reminders. In reminders, I would love to see more types of views, like maybe a board view with columns or maybe a grid view. Like it's fine to keep a default list view, but I would love to have like more options for different view modes, like an icon grid view for my reminders, or columns, like a little Trello board for my reminders. This is a very specific one. I would love to be able to filter one of to be able to create a smart list that filters reminders from multiple lists. Right now, if you add the filtering criteria to a smart list and you add the reminder is from a list, you can only pick a single list. I would love to create smart lists that filter reminders that come from multiple other lists in the app. And lastly, I will mention, I would love to get a quick capture widget or some kind of spotlight integration to quickly capture a reminder on my iPhone without having to open the Reminders app. Imagine if I could somehow have a system-wide capture mode for reminders that didn't force me to use Siri, but instead was visual and allowed me to just type whatever I am, a reminder that I want to save.
All right. I am going to finish up my lists with something from home, which has been bothering me recently, which is my new house has thermostats on all 3 floors. It's just got one heating cooling unit, but it's independently controlled on each of the floors. And I'm using these Honeywell T9 thermostats that have not only temperature sensors in them, but also have kind of the outboard temperature and humidity sensors, a little bit like Ecobee does too. And so I have access to the temperature in a bunch of different rooms in my house, but it's too far buried into the home app. And I'd like some of that sensor data to be surfaceable at a much higher level. Right now, you have to kind of go in, find the climate section kind of at the top, tap into that, and then look at it room by room. I'd like to be able to elevate those a little higher and have it surfaced in the UI better, which it's not at the moment.
Mm-hmm. All right, so it's just my list.
You know what? I'm going to let you close out with a super lightning round.
Okay, a passwords app. I think it's time to have a proper native passwords app. I think Apple is doing a disservice to its users by hiding the password manager inside of settings. More people would create secure passwords and live a better life if passwords was right there on their home screens as a standalone app. Notes. I want to be able to paste a URL from my clipboard into a note and have it become a rich link, just like you can in Apple Mail in iOS 16. I would love to be able to create sub-pages inside of notes, just like I can in Craft, for example. Imagine a note that had page navigation. That would be amazing. Obviously, I mentioned this before, Markdown support. I think Apple supports Markdown in some places. On macOS even, they support Markdown in Xcode. Yep. I would love to format my notes in Markdown in Apple Notes and have it become rich text. Obviously, internal links, like wiki links for my notes. Let me reference another note from my notes library just by typing a special character or something. Let me create deep links to specific notes, and just like with reminders, I would love to see more work put into the quick note feature, which is the equivalent of a quick capture wish that I mentioned for reminders. Quick Note exists on the iPhone, but it should be easier to access, and it should also allow me to browse all of my quick notes and not just default to creating a new quick note every single time.
Yep.
Files, just one wish for files. I would love to have smart folders and saved searches because, you know me, I like those features. And much to your surprise, John, I'm done. I mentioned everything.
Wow. Yeah, it's smart folders and saved searches is something that should be basically everywhere it makes sense. I mean, I think we've talked about that a lot in the past, but files especially is a good place to have it. All right, Federico, before we leave, we have to pick our top threes.
Yes. Okay, so my top three were power user features in shortcuts, interactive widgets on the home screen, and smart speed in the podcast app.
All right. Mine is a revamp of Control Center, bug fixes and shortcuts, and music recommendations that aren't, that don't just emphasize what you've listened to the most recently. I know that's that one's a little squishy.
Better music recommendations.
Yeah, better music recommendations, yes. Why don't we pick the App Stories top three out of these?
Okay, so I would say, because we have overlapping shortcuts, sure we should pick the shortcuts one.
Yeah, we should go broad because you said power user features, which I think.
Well, bug fixes, they also they affect power users the most.
That's true.
So I think shortcuts, new shortcuts features for power users should be one. I think I will let you have. I think I'll let you have Control Center, because I think it's more important at this point than the interactive home screen widgets.
I feel like there's a good chance we'll get that too. I really do. I really think
Control Center.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that we'll get that this year. I just feel like we've heard a lot of rumors that it's going. There are some gimmies that people have asked for a long time that Apple's working on. I think that's probably on the list somewhere.
Yeah. So let's say shortcuts, power user features, a new Control Center. I don't know. Would you let me have smart speed in podcasts?
I was gonna suggest smart speed because I would like to have that too. I think that would really make the Apple Podcasts app a lot more attractive to a wider audience.
All right, and that's the App Story's top 3 wishes for iOS 17.
All right, fantastic. Well, Federico, that was a good conversation. We got a lot more of these to do. We've got iPadOS.
Oh boy.
We're going to do a combo watchOS and tvOS. We're going to do macOS, and we're going to do the OS that doesn't even exist, at least in our lives. So we'll be doing the Reality OS or whatever it happens to be called eventually. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode. That is Hit the Island from Fun Media. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net, and we're on Mastodon. You can go to vitici.macstories.net to follow Federico. You can go to johnvorhees.macstories.net to follow me. And, of course, we're on Instagram, where Federico is at Vitici. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.